about 4 decades. And as an organization, we've traditionally been best known for our helpline, which really serves as our single point of contact. Should anyone have a follow-up question to anything that we talk about today during our presentation, or anything else comes up along your caregiving journey, we really invite you to call. Nothing is too small, nothing is too big. We are able to provide support on a large range of things. We serve both as a resource for information referral, as well as an introduction to rich programs that we offer here. In terms of caregiver support services, yes, we do have a number of wonderful services. We have what's called online services and in-person kind of, benefits of COVID. I guess the outcome is that we've learned how to go virtual, so we can support people really around the country. In terms of caregiver services, we have wonderful support groups that are specific to the type of relationship you're in. So if it is an adult child caring for a parent, we have those types of groups. If they are spouse or partner groups, we have those as well. And generally speaking, we have groups for other niches as well. So if our group doesn't exist, you can talk to us and we can look to form one that would meet your needs. Also, for caregiving support and services, we have these things called dementia consultations, where we provide help and support that are more tailored and unique to a situation that comes up. But what we really like to do is engage people in something called REACH, which is an evidence-based program for coaching one-on-one, where over about 6 months you get to get the support of a social worker or dementia care consult, dementia coach specialist here, and we'd be able to work with them on the topics that are most relevant to you. It could be self-care, it could be dealing with difficult and challenging behaviors, the ways we can improve our communication with the person living with dementia, things of that nature. Additionally, we have a program that exists where you can have a time down number of sessions where you're meeting in a group situation. And in that situation, it's kind of a combination of the educational components of understanding dementia and also the emotional support of being in a group setting going through it. We have a ton of early stage programs that are designed to provide support directly to the individual who has an early stage diagnosis. So someone who's living with dementia, maybe mild cognitive decline, maybe mild cognitive impairment, maybe an early dementia diagnosis. And those groups are fantastic. They are mostly known as cognitive stimulation therapy, but there are others as well, where you really have an opportunity to form new memories and to use the muscle of making decisions and sharing opinions and being able to exercise physically, emotionally, and in the context of a community, engage in conversation, review articles. It's a chance to kind of keep what is working, to continue working as well as it can. We also have within the early stage range opportunities to give people the experience to share what it feels like to be a person living with dementia, and to, in a theater style program, be able to invite those who are closest to you to listen to you as you give over what that means to you and how you're, potentially a person with lots of other facets besides being a person with dementia. And it gives a chance for the caregivers like yourselves to potentially understand through this view what the experience day to day is like for someone living with dementia. There are other early stage programs too that focus on developing individuals who can become advocates. I mentioned support groups before, tons and tons of support groups. We also have a relatively new program called MAP, which I'll just mention very quickly, which is around pairing people with mentors who were former caregivers. So right now, those of you who are caregivers might really feel that so much of your identity is wrapped up in being a caregiver. Some of you might be sandwich generation, kind of caregiving for little ones and caregiving for parents, but whatever it might be, if you are caregivers, you certainly can appreciate that that's a lot of your identity. At some point when we experience the loss of the person for whom we're caring and we're no longer a caregiver, sometimes people feel that it's meaningful to give back and to continue and tap into that role. So you can be trained through us to be a mentor to a dyad, meaning a person living with dementia and the person who is the caregiver, and help guide them through that process. That's called MAP. We have Connect to Culture, which is kind of a program that you can tap into periodically when you're interested in getting connected to the arts and culture, music and symphonies and museums that are, again, designed for that dyad, for the two to come together, ideally the person with dementia and a caregiver who can experience it virtually or in person, and it's with a dementia-friendly lens. Gives you, I think, a quality of life boost in terms of being able to participate in things that are meaningful. We have tons of education training. I guess tonight falls into that. bucket of things. In terms of education and training, we have programs like Understanding Dementia, figuring out the finances, the legal, the home health aid, scenario. How does one get into Medicaid? Everything that you might imagine is relevant, I think we tap into. And again, if we don't already touch upon something, we're happy to look into it. And the last one, which I just think is important to say that sometimes goes unnoticed, is we say, oh, my person that I care for, they're not wandering, so I don't need this wander safety program. And of course, people do wander. We don't know when they're going to wander. And so the Wander Safety Program, which is a partnership with New York City Medical Alert, is a chance to basically put information about the person for whom you're caring into a national registry and to wear a little tiny bracelet. And that bracelet basically is sized, put on your arm and stays there. And then God forbid the person goes and wanders, at least the medics and the police and whatnot who are finding out this individual, they know that this individual is registered in the program and has some sense of how to redirect them. And in the process, we provide support to the care partner or caregiver who is searching for their loved one. That's a snapshot. I don't think I did justice, but it gives you an overview of the breadth and depth. So we're really here for supporting you for the journey. With that, I turn it back to Adina. Thank you.
Shira. Okay. So for our agenda tonight, so we just did our overview of Care and Kind Services. We're going to actually start about talking about self-compassion and self-care, something which I don't think is spoken about enough to caregivers. We'll be talking about dementia-specific considerations for Passover, Seder considerations, dealing with family conflict, some tips for Pesach preparation, and also about rabbinic consultation. When should a rabbi be called, and how that can be an important aspect, especially when it comes to dementia. So self-compassion is this idea that you were talking to yourself the way you would be speaking to a good friend. I think a lot of times it tends to be that we're most critical to ourselves. And if you think about the self-talk that you often give yourself, if you're anything like me, certainly, it can often be very harsh, like, oh, that was stupid. Why did you do such a stupid thing? If you take a step back and you start thinking about, if I were talking to somebody who was not me, let's say, you have a friend who made a mistake or a friend who's going through a difficult time, you probably would be talking in a much more compassionate way. And so it's really important to try to slow down and try to give yourself some slack and talk to yourself as if you would a friend. A lot of that is helped by mindfulness. We're going to be talking a lot about mindfulness, just really taking things one step at a time. I think especially when it comes to Pesach, when it comes to both preparing for Pesach, when it comes to actually dealing during the holiday with all sorts of things, it can be hard to kind of just like take a breath and just stay in the moment because there's just so much to do. But even just, taking a deep breath and trying to calm and center yourself, I think really can be very helpful in this endeavor. Some ideas from Pesach. So we have a practice, it's called Kol Chamira, which is where we declare that chametz, that anything that's leavened will be annulled. It doesn't exist. The truth of the matter is when it comes to a Pesach cleaning, for those who clean for Pesach, we try our best. We do everything we possibly can to get any little piece of chametz, of leaven, but at the same time, it's almost impossible to completely be chametz free. And it's really a way that we can acknowledge our humanness. We're not perfect. We can't do everything, but we can try to do our best. And I think that's a perfect metaphor, an example for us to take when it comes to thinking about our caregiving experience. In that, it is important that we do our best. It may not be perfect, but we are all human and doing our best. And I think keeping that in mind, both with Pesach, both with caregiving, is very, very important. Another thought from Pesach is, the Jews left Egypt. It says in the Torah, the Hebrew word is b'chipazon, that they left in haste. They left very, very quickly. And a lot of times that the spirit of this season is that everything has to be done, quickly and in a frenzy. And it happens to be that when it comes to dementia, haste has never been beneficial for somebody with dementia. In fact, caring for somebody with dementia really requires that we slow down. So, and even just thinking about taking this time to have compassion for yourself, to take things step by step, take things one at a time, it will ultimately not only help you in terms of your own well-being, but it will help the person who you're caring for as well. Another really important concept is self-care. I love emphasizing, I mean, I think in our society, when we think of self-care, we think, oh, well, you know, you go to a spa, or you go to manicure, you know, get a manicure or do something that usually involves money. But it's actually not necessarily that. It's really about making sure that we are cared for, that what we need both physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, everything is that, and that we attend to. And so these principles I talk about throughout the year in various presentations, but in terms of thinking about it for Pesach and how to care for ourselves when it comes to Pesach. So certain things to think about. I mean, throughout the year also, enlisting help is always important. Not one person cannot do everything. Perhaps there are family members who can be called upon to do certain tasks. If you can, you know, get somebody who is a professional to help with cleaning or with getting food, anything that can kind of free you up, you know, as you feel you need, is important, and you should not be, you know, questioned whether or not to do it. You know, if you can, do it. Another important aspect of self-care is really managing expectations. I think especially when it comes to holiday time, you know, we have our ideas of what we want things to look like, of what we want our Seder to look like, of how we want our family to behave, and all sorts of things. And, you know, some of those things are just out of our grasp. It's really important to appraise your abilities. What can I do? What can't I do? You also want to keep in mind the abilities of the person with dementia. You know, perhaps that person, you have some great memories of how that person was, you know, in previous Pesachs, and now they're so different. You know, that can certainly bring up a lot of feelings, and it can be really hard to let go of that of what who that person was in the past. But we really try again to stay in the present and keep in mind what the abilities of that person is right now, to both make it a comfortable experience for them, and ultimately, if it's a comfortable experience for them, it will be a comfortable experience for you. Again, you want to think about what's under your control and what's not. And I also want to, I'm going to be mentioning this a lot as well. It is important to have rabbinic guidance if you need. You know, don't hesitate to call a rabbi, ask a question, particularly when it comes to cleaning. People can go really, if you could please mute, I'm sorry, thank you. Especially when it comes to cleaning, people can really go all out. That can add a lot of stress. It may not even be necessary, because remember, we're cleaning for Pesach, so we're cleaning for leaven and chametz. We're not really cleaning for spring, so we don't need necessarily to rearrange everybody's closet or things like that. So it is important to you know, have a trusted rabbi you can speak with. I know, you know, a lot of medical questions come up. We'll be talking about, you know, different questions that might come up with home health aides. So that's also really important, and it can also decrease some of the stress, because you'll know what to do instead of second guessing yourself all the time. Another thing to think about as you're preparing is just taking some short breaks and doing small things that bring you joy. I mean, these could be, you know, silly things like, you know, taking a walk for 10 minutes. I was reading an article about a woman writing about her experience of Pesach cleaning, and she was saying how, you know, she, in between, you know, in the process of all this Pesach cleaning, she decided to take a break. She took her kids for ice cream. So, you know, just thinking about doing something small that can bring you joy. It doesn't only have to be, you know, the drudge work of cleaning.
Thanks, Adina. You know, I'm just thinking, as I'm listening to you speak so beautifully, I'm thinking about how this is probably so much of what you said are things that we could all benefit from every day of the year, like just to appreciate that what we're doing is good enough, and that as long as we're putting in something, our effort, and we're doing our shtadlis, we're putting forth our effort and we're doing the best we can, that really is good enough. And that if we can let go of the expectations of ourselves and others, that's so huge. And I think especially for the population of you who are the caregivers, it doesn't necessarily come so naturally to be a caregiver and then to accept help from others. And I want to just really echo that it's so incredibly valuable that if we become too stressed out, it just becomes a lot harder to be able to provide the care that we want to in a fashion that's going to be supportive of the people in our lives who are living with dementia. So it actually behooves us to take the care we can to kind of regroup and pause, and then we can be more present for that individual or those individuals if there's more than one. In terms of things to remember, I think there's a common idea that somehow we can feel like we're responsible for someone else's mood. And that, again, is true in our lives often. If we see someone we care about and they're angry and they're sad, we want to do everything we can to make them feel better. And sometimes we take it on, but really we can only do our best. And we have to remember that we're not responsible for another person's mood, especially a person living with dementia. That's not to say that there aren't some things that we can do, right? If we notice that the person with dementia is feeling overwhelmed, we could start to think, okay, let's play detective for a little bit. What about this experience might be overwhelming? Is the light too bright? Is it too warm in here? You start to look about external environmental things or the things that I can change that might make this person more comfortable. Is this person feeling tired? Do they need to take a rest? Like you can do that, but we can't change the experience for them overall. The second thing is acknowledging that things can be different than they were in the past. So much of this holiday is about, recollections of the past, but it's also about experiencing things in the present. And so I think each Seder, the same way we read the Parsha every year and we return to the same Parsha, the truth is that we're different when we return to it year after year. And so too, the people in our life who are living with dementia are going through changes as well. So just as we're different, they're also different, and just acknowledging it need not be the same, and it most likely will not be the same. And by giving us the permission to let it be different, I think it opens up the possibility of being more okay with however it turns out, knowing that we put our best foot forward. This third point says that the Seder can be a wonderful opportunity for the person living with dementia to connect with good memories of the past, and we can use this opportunity to create positive moments for ourselves as well. So, there are a lot of different aspects of the Seder, and I think the aspect that speaks to many people is the music that we often save for the end, right? We follow the Seder, we follow the order, and a lot of the fantastic songs come at the end. The moment we're going to pause, we're going to listen to some of the beautiful music. And I really want to highlight that for a person living with dementia, no matter how much their disease has progressed, the part of their being that tends to be healthiest and strongest and where you see them sort of shine and come to life is often through music. And so it is such a beautiful thing that the Seder has so much music in it. And to the extent that you can potentially bring it earlier to the Seder or do like a medley at the beginning, if that's possible, something that would make it feel more engaging and experiential. So we'll do that in a second. And then those moments can be meaningful for us as caregivers as well, not just for the people living with dementia. If we can sort of say, okay, we're sort of starting a new chapter here. What is this going to look like? And for some people, that may even entail the person who has traditionally led stepping into a role of more of being a participant. And that's hard, but we can also create the opportunity of having a new leader emerge in the family setting. So we can think door, right? We're having an opportunity to embrace the next generation doing this. And finally, we said that during the Seder and the holiday, we want to try to stay in the present moment. That's not always so easy, but again, like we are trying to experience this Seder, this time. And it's, I think our mind naturally kind of compares and contrasts to things, how they've been in other times, but how do we make this Seder the most meaningful it could be? Adina, do you want to take a split moment and just play that medley, do you think?
I can. I just also want to mention, just to piggyback off of something that you said, in terms of, connecting with good memories and creating positive moments. I once heard, it's not my phrase, but I heard a wonderful phrase about the importance of creating islands in time of positive experiences for a person who's, a person with dementia and their caregiver, because so much of of what you do is just about getting from one thing to another thing, and it's a lot of difficulty, and really it's really important to have those moments. It may just be, a few minutes, maybe an hour, or it's not good. We're not necessarily talking about a long time, but it is those moments of creating connection, of connecting, to music, of connecting to other things that you both find enjoyable, is really important. I'm happy to share the medley.
We can always come back to it maybe later on, but I just want to say that the music is so incredibly powerful and it's such a gift. And you're right. I find we listened to this medley earlier when we were preparing for this. And in just a few moments, I noticed my own mood become so uplifted while the familiar tunes. And I think it's easy to tap into that. And so even through a minute or two or three of this medley, I think hopefully that is possible to be generated in ourselves, as well as hopefully the people living with dementia when the Seder time comes.
I don't know what you're gonna see on my screen, so.
Surprise.
Yeah, right. Let me get this one. You can hear it? Oh, wait, I don't think you can hear it. Okay, wait.
I feel like I heard it turn on and then
Hold on. I see what I did. I have to change the screen. I apologize.
So needless to say, you know your people best, you know the people in your life and what they're going to resonate. But a lot of us know this first song about the order of the Seder. And let's listen for a second, see what brings up for us. Okay, the taste. Let's see, Ima.
Yeah. Let me just get back to
the tease, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next slide, we're gonna spend another moment talking about mindfulness and how that's connected to this idea of staying in the present moment. I think it's very hard to do. I'm sure everyone on this call leads very busy lives, and there's a sense of the world moving very quickly. And maybe this is our moment to kind of think about Shabbat, how like we at least pause from electronics, presumably, or at least try to do something a little bit differently than the rest of the week. And in thinking about this, we were thinking about how really, if we listen to the story of Pesach, are we supposed to experience it as though we're recalling the memories of someone else, or are we supposed to ideally go through the Seder and experience the Haggadah as if we are in it and we are experiencing the Exodus from Egypt? And we know that we're supposed to try to have it feel as though we are experiencing the Exodus ourselves. So even though it happened in the past, we're being commanded, inspired, encouraged to try to experience it in the present. And with that, I thought that's a nice segue into the world of mindfulness, which, as many of you may know, is a very common practice, which is got roots in a whole lot of different places, but we even see it right in the world of Judaism. There was all the practicing going on before starting Kabbalat Shabbat, try to zone into that moment. A very simple mindfulness exercise, which can be practiced in a matter of moments, is that of grounding oneself. And I think it's a relatively easy thing because you can do it anywhere you are, and it doesn't necessarily seem strange to the people around you. So the practice consists of just really relying upon your 5 senses. And some of you may have used this before with others or use this for yourself. And basically, you're going to use each of your 5 senses to identify 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in each category. You can choose whichever categories you want to do the most of. I usually go for 5 things to touch. It could be something you're wearing, feel the material. Oh, this is soft and snuggly. Oh, it's kind of like, feels very soothing. Oh, I feel the smoothness of the chair that I'm sitting in. That's, whatever it might be, but you can pick 5 things to touch, and you can sort of compare and contrast in your mind the differences in those experiences. Maybe 4 things to see. I'm looking at this beautiful drop of water ahead of me, this serene moment. I wonder, is this a pond, a lake? Let's see, where am I? I'd like to be there. Look at the ripple effects. I'm looking at some beautiful faces. I'm taking in things that I see. So I would do 4 of those. And then I move on to 3 things that I hear. What do I hear? Right now I hear the sound of my voice. Maybe I hear my heart beating. Maybe I hear like a system in the back of me, like a heating system, whatever it may be. What is it that you can tap into that you hear? 2 things that I smell. Not so many options around me, but whatever it might be. Nothing's coming to mind, but I would try to think of something. And 1 thing that I can taste. Like, what was the last thing maybe that I drank or ate? I had some water, not so much taste there, maybe something before that. But if you could do this related to the Pesach experience, think of how rich it could be. Oh, 5 things that I can touch. I can, I'm wearing something perhaps new and beautiful for the Hagim, for the holiday, and I want to look and admire that this is so beautiful. I'm putting on my best self, and I feel like I just had my hair done and my whatever it is that you feel, something that's new and something that I can see that I'm surrounded by the people in my life who are important to me, or I can notice who's not here that I'm able to think about. And what do I hear? Oh, I can hear the conversation around me. They're singing, we're reading from the Haggadah, something. Maybe I'm noticing the sound as people are drinking, or how they're leaning to the left, whatever it might be, right? You're tapping into what's happening around you. The smells of maybe the horseradish, the maror, the bitter, or maybe I smell something like the matzo ball soup that's might be, sizzling behind me, whatever it might be. But to the extent that you can just take a few moments, I think you can do it in preparation for the actual Seder, or I think you can do it at any moment throughout the holiday. So I invite you to try this if this is something that's useful. And if you have other mindfulness exercises that you're more familiar with or comfortable with, I would encourage you to try that as well. Okay. Seder considerations. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into our pre-Pesach experience. And I think the more observant people tend to put in a lot of preparation. I think most people will have a fancy, yummy, delicious meal with friends and family, hopefully. I think there's different levels, as Adina was alluding to, the extent of Pesach cleaning that happens beforehand. Imagine now that we are all sitting at this beautifully decorated table and it's the actual Seder. A lot of this depends. Are you hosting yourself? Are you being invited to someone else's home? Are you doing this in the shul that's in your community? Are you going to someone else's shul community? And all those different permutations, but you're at someone's Seder table and you're sitting with all these things around you. To the extent that you have some upfront information, it can really go a long way. And the idea is that the participants who are going to be at the table with you may not be as familiar, or may not be familiar at all, with the fact that there's a person in your life who's living with dementia. And to the extent that you have the opportunity to explain to them, whoever is not on mute, I see a couple of people, if I could just encourage you to mute, Ula and a few other people, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. We're just picking up a little bit of background noise. So to the extent that you're able to prepare the people who are going to be at the table with you, that you do have a person living with your dementia in your life, and some behaviors they may expect, you can just kind of give them a little bit of advance notice. For some, depending on how advanced it is, someone can come to the table and food that's not typically finger food might suddenly be scarfed down with their fingers, and it might be very messy. Again, is that an expectation we hold for ourselves or for them? I think it's really more if the person's able to enjoy, that's great, but maybe the people around you don't want giving like, glances in a way that might be judgmental or might be off-putting. So you can just say, this is what happens, and we're just glad this person is able to participate and be at the table with us and be part of this experience. Whatever the particular behaviors you have that might be disconcerting. Perhaps the person gets easily agitated. Perhaps the person is going to get confused. Maybe they'll doze off. You could comfortably, casually, before the Seder begins, perhaps offline in a separate phone call or even email, just let them know this is the way things are going. The second one, making provisions for the person with dementia to leave and go to a quiet room during the Seder. They may not be able to sit through the whole thing. I imagine all of us have Seders that go into the wee hours of the morning. We start at night, particularly on the second night, for those of you who do second night, and it just keeps on going and going. And you start so late in the evening, it's hard to, stick with it for anyone, regardless of whether or not they have dementia. So how much more so for the person with a cognitive decline? At some point, it may just become too much. We also know that people with dementia are very much impacted by sunsetting, which is, this idea that as the sun sets, there's an increase in disorientation. So you can try to prepare the person and make them feel comfortable, the person living with dementia, by saying at any point, you want to take a step away, I see like maybe this is the right time, and you can invite them and accompany them to their new spot and get them settled. And, other people are going to be leaving the table for various reasons too. And this is okay as well. And the third thing, consider doing an early pre-Seder. I think this is really a nice idea. It's not always easy to pull off, but sometimes other members of the table can benefit from this, particularly if they're young children. So you could have an early pre-Seder, and the person with dementia who's not able to stay up and be involved for the whole thing can still sit for the whole thing and have the experience of having gone through it. You can do a shortened or an abridged version of the Seder in the beginning, and after the person with dementia goes to another space and excuses him or herself, you can continue on or pick up from, a spot that feels more appropriate, even backtracking a little bit. Anything that you can do to adjust the environment is key, because the person with dementia is not going to be able to make changes. That individual is doing the best, presumably, that he or she can do. So we need to make the changes. That's what this is, the framework from which all of these suggestions are being presented. Sometimes just having snacks available at the table, this list that Adina came up with, I think is amazing. I think they're all really practical, manageable tips that we can take. It's hard to wait. I mean, the Seder, the Haggadah, we're reading for a very long time before you get a morsel of food. So if we think that people may have a tough time waiting until food, and just giving a little something to nosh on is enough to kind of keep things moving along, that might be a simple suggestion to enact. And we talked before about songs being beneficial. I really totally believe this. And I think having like an upfront medley, even just to get the person with dementia fully engaged as early on, and to like orient them to what we're doing here, it can be a very effective way. So that's kind of why we went ahead and played that little medley, just to give you a sense that, without a musical recording, you can all sing this yourselves. This could be, something that's a cappella style that you bring in, I think could be really beautiful. We have a few more Seder considerations, but they're on the next slide. So we're going to click into the next slide. We might be inclined to want to ask the person who has dementia if they remember so-and-so, or do they remember how we used to do this? And it's really probably best not to go down that path. But instead, if you want to say, I remember when, or this was so meaningful to me, we've had this long tradition of doing X, Y, and Z, that's probably a lot better, because then the person doesn't potentially get defensive, feeling that they are in a position where they're not able to answer and might feel embarrassed. We certainly don't want to embarrass anybody. We want to talk about where it's best to put the person with dementia at the table. Maybe the person with dementia is, in fact, the person who has been leading the Seder for decades. Maybe the person is someone who's usually just a participant, and in either case, you want to place the participant wherever you feel that they will be most comfortable, wherever they will have perhaps easiest access to be able to leisurely excuse themselves from the table when it feels like it's too much. For some, it's a matter of kavod, and sitting at the head of the table is very important. But then is there going to be someone who can step aside and can step in and kind of also give over the information when maybe there's an awkward moment? Or does the person want to just sort of blend in and like not have all the attention on them? Sometimes it's uncomfortable attention. So you know your people best. That's what we always say. The best thing you can do in caring for someone living with dementia is to really understand them, you know, what's going to make them feel most comfortable. But I think having, you know, an easy way to excuse themselves from the table seems like a good tip. I think it's important to be flexible. And again, this is probably one of those things that I would have said is helpful day in, day out. And I don't necessarily, I think of Passover and flexibility in the same sentence. It feels a little bit like an oxymoron. Like I think Seder and order, and this is the way it needs to be. But I think recalling that it's going to be different when you have a person living with dementia at the table, and just having them at the table is meaningful, and having them be part of it, and whatever we can do to engage them and everyone else at the same time is meaningful. But maybe we can remember that there are some things that we can lean into. Like maybe we have a tradition or a minchag of, you know, taking our backpacks and filling them and walking around the table and lugging this big, you know, heavy thing as we leave Egypt. Or maybe we take the leeks and we're hitting them on the people next to us. Whatever the things, we might have to modify that a little bit, but ultimately we just want to be experiential and comfortable for everyone. So I guess the theme is around inclusivity. How do we make this comfortable for everyone? Similar to what we said before, we want to try not to put the person living with dementia in the spotlight. So if the person is being called upon to read the Haggadah, you can maybe just make sure that there's someone sitting right next to who can easily, like maybe as a primary caregiver or kind of is familiar with, they can just pop in and fill in whatever's missing, so that the person has a chance, has some agency, and can choose for themselves to what extent they want to participate. But it's not like there's this big quiet gap and no one knows what to do if suddenly they're like stumbling and not able to make it happen. So that someone can kind of come right in and pick up where the other person left off. The suggestion I thought was kind of fun. Consider eating still a healthy diet, but maybe substituting some things. It's like being a little bit more lenient in restrictions that are dietary. Obviously consult with a medical professional if this causes you any concern, or Rabbi, if this causes you any religious question. But to the extent that this can be fun and special and meaningful, I think often we celebrate that through foods. And if there's a way to make it joyous and festive, I don't know, I hear like a dessert in my face, I just smile. So I imagine there's something like that for everyone, whatever that treat is. Maybe we can introduce that. We don't want to force the person to eat. And I think that, you know, there is always this tension and this opportunity to, specifically for those of you who are more observant, to talk to a rabbi, you know, how much of the course of the grape juice do we really need to have? How much of the matzah do we really need to have? Is this also true for someone who has an illness? Even if it's somewhat invisible, there are changes happening in the brain. You know, what are the ramifications here? Where's the flexibility? What do we absolutely have to have? Because maybe it's best simply not to agitate the person and not to encourage them or demand that they do something that they don't want to do. Sometimes, as you can imagine, the Seder brings back powerful memories of all different aspects of one's life. And so too, the person living with dementia can go from being calm and sort of just present to going back into the past and thinking about relatives who they do not realize are deceased. So like, where's mom, where's dad? And those people may have long passed. So one of the primary things we say about working with someone with dementia is, rather than trying to bring them into our reality, we try to step into their reality. So you can use this opportunity to say, oh, tell me, what do you miss most about mom? If she were here right now, what would you like to see Ima say? What, you know, you can, without correcting them or in any way disagreeing with them, invite them to share what was meaningful in that relationship that they had, or what's an attribute that they really appreciate, or if they were here right now, like what would they want to say? Because it kind of, it allows them to honor their relationship with that person without getting into a conflict unnecessarily. Yeah, the last thing, keep that experience positive. Do whatever you can to make the environment meaningful, upbeat, and inviting. With that, I turn it back to Adina. Thank you.
Thank you, Shira. So another aspect that often happens with, I think, almost every holiday is the potential for family conflict. And so we have a couple of points here I wanted to make just about managing family conflict. Obviously, just like we've been saying this whole time, we really want to try to keep things pleasant, particularly on the Seder night. We want it to be a pleasant experience for the person who has dementia. We want it to be a pleasant experience for ourselves. It may be worthwhile to avoid discussing certain topics if you know that it's going to make a family member agitated, if it's going to make the person who you're caring for agitated, if it's going to make you agitated. It may be worth having some, topics of discussion that are just not going to be discussed. It's also not unusual, particularly on holiday times. This is when, families get to come together. They may not have seen the person who has dementia in a while. They may not have realized how bad things are. And so, they may have their own ideas about what should be going on. So it's not unusual for family members to, have conflicts around, how much this person needs help. Maybe they feel that maybe you can have siblings who feel that, mom needs more help or mom needs less help. There may be, not seeing eye to eye around, actually like what caregiving actually should be done for the person. There may be some resentments around, certain people not doing enough and, versus the siblings who are doing. These are all not unusual experiences. It's important to try to find common ground. I mean, the bottom line is that more often than not, particularly when it comes to sibling conflict around caregiving, particularly at the Seder itself, it's not that hard to find common ground and to say, we really want to focus on just making this a pleasant experience for mom or dad or whoever we're taking care of. And to be able and to just have an enjoyable experience for right now. It may be that after the holiday, there might need to be some more discussions, but at least for the moment, it might not be it's not a bad idea to just, ask to shelve it just for the sake of, certainly the parents that, they're expressing concerns about. Another thing to realize, and in asking for help, I get this a lot from caregivers that I counsel. A lot of times caregivers might be hesitant to ask other family members for help because they feel like they're not going to do things the right way. And they may not. I mean, they may not do it the way you do it. You may be doing it much more efficiently, and they may not. I think one thing that is important is to realize that just because the people are doing something differently doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. They're just, people have their different styles, their different abilities, and their different ways of doing things. And it's back to that idea of being flexible. The more one can be flexible with these things, the better a cooperative relationship can happen. And then there's the other piece that certain things can't be changed. Certain family members have their ideas and, there are things that you cannot change. And then sometimes it's not something that can be fixed at the moment. And then it's really just about figuring out how you want to deal with realities that are on the ground. So a few tips for preparing for Pesach in terms of cleaning and cooking. It's helpful to make lists and menus to prioritize, like, what should be done first. The big projects, prioritizing big projects first is certainly useful, prioritizing areas where there's food. If you know that there has not been food in any bedrooms, don't even bother with them, obviously, but you really want to prioritize where you think the food has been. In terms of home health aides, there are a couple of really important things. Firstly, I'm going to go out of order, but this season is holiday season for a lot of different people. I believe Easter is happening on April 9th. So a lot of times home health aides will take off at this time. You want to make sure and inquire that you have coverage if your home health aide is taking off. It might be worth having a discussion just to make sure that you're not left high and dry, during the holiday, because that would be pretty bad. Another thing to keep in mind is you want to also talk about the home health aides who are staying about the Pesach preparations and about food restrictions that they can expect during the holiday. You might want to consult with a rabbi in terms of if a home health aide is going to bring a chametz, lunch, what can they eat it in the house? Do they have to eat it outside? Those are things I would defer to a rabbi for consultation. But these are questions that are important and that you might want to consider. And also you want to prep the aide about what to expect with Pesach for a week. This is kind of how we live. You also might want to offer the home health aide to, that they can eat from your house, for eating Pesach food. And then this way, you don't really have to worry about what food is being brought into the home. In terms of the holiday and preparations, I kind of already mentioned this in self-care, but you want to try to simplify meals as much as possible. Maybe you don't want to do the really fancy, brisket or something and just go with roasted chicken or something simple, or maybe just, takeout or, cater, or possibly see if another family member can make the Seder. And then this way it's not something that you have to worry about. And lastly, one thing to keep in mind as well, and I do think there still is time, there are kosher assisted living facilities. Most, if not all of them, do offer respite care options, which are short-term options at an assisted living facility, and they take people for Pesach. If that is something you think would be useful, it might be useful to, and helpful to take your person and see if respite care might be a good option for them, where they can stay at an assisted living facility for a week. And then this way their meals are done and, they have activities and all is pretty set. Those are private pay options, obviously, but those are options that are on the that are available. So just some other dementia-specific considerations. For many people who have dementia, Pesach may heighten their anxiety. If you start telling them 3 weeks before Pesach that Pesach is coming, they may get very anxious. They may not really understand when Pesach is. They may not really understand that, we still have enough time. They may think Pesach is like tonight. So it's helpful in those situations not to really discuss anything Pesach until closer to the Seder. Even with cleaning, you may not even want to clean in front of them if that's going to trigger it, because you don't want to heighten their anxiety around this. If you're things to think about, especially for people who are taking care of parents, many I have many caregivers who are cleaning two homes, their own and their parents' home. You might want to consider really simplifying it for the person you're caring for. You might want to get a special microwave or a single burner, not really bother using the stove, or looking for other ways to cut down on cleaning, closing up many cabinets or not using certain shelves in the fridge, and just sort of simplifying things as much as possible. Other things to keep in mind, the truth is you don't need this necessarily even just for a person with dementia, but using clear signs to indicate, where the kosher for Pesach stuff is and where the chametz is. You might even want to use different colors or use pictures so that the person, will register that information easier. And if a person asks for chametz during Pesach, maybe they've lost track of the fact that it is Pesach, instead of going into, it's Pesach and potentially getting it back and forth around whether or not it's Pesach, you should just explain that you don't have whatever it is that they want, if it's bread or some other, not kosher for Pesach item, and you can guide them to, taking something that is available in the house. But you really want to try to not get into a discussion about chametz and Pesach and a power struggle about whether or not it is Pesach. So as I mentioned, consulting your rabbi, in many instances, the person who has dementia may not even be obligated in certain activities, given their abilities. Like what Shira was mentioning about not making them eat. They may not have to eat matzah. They may not have to have the 4 cups. You know, it depending on you know, their cognitive abilities at you know, in the moment. They may actually not have a very strong obligation as somebody who is cognitively intact. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And on top of that means that you as the caregiver may not be required to facilitate their performing these certain mitzvot. So I can even give you an example. I had this is an actual case that I had where a parent was confused. I believe this was either last year or 2 years ago, where the day before Pesach was on Shabbos, and the mother who had dementia, insisted on getting food that was not kosher for Pesach for that Shabbos, and the caregiver was quite upset about this. But when they spoke to the rabbi basically said, "Look, your mother is not necessarily obligated. I mean, not you know, her degree of obligation is different. You are not required to make sure that, you know, everything is perfect after the fact." So again, that's just one instance that I know of. I'm just saying that I'm using this not to say what to do. I'm saying this to highlight that it is important to have these discussions with the rabbi, because I know there can be a lot of pressure that the caregiver might feel just in terms of you know, making sure that their parents keep the holiday appropriately. And so it is very important to realize that there are real questions, there are real answers, and it's important to talk to a rabbinic authority. It's also important, I mean, there's a lot of different practices that come with Pesach. Many times things are a mitzvah where it's, you know, required. Other things are just a custom. So also important to distinguish what's, you know, prioritizing, like what's really important and what's stuff that, you know, is important, but, you know, in this particular situation, it may not be, you know, the hill to die on. And as I mentioned, rabbis will know the halachic tools that are available to help in your given situation. And all situations are individual and unique. Just because a rabbi said something for one person may not necessarily mean it would work for you. It's important to really give him the whole picture of the situation to get a good idea of what to do. Lastly, and then we're going to have a discussion in terms of after Pesach. So after Pesach, we sort of go straight from, you know, Pesach to chametz again. And that can be also very jarring for a person with dementia. They may keep thinking that it's still Pesach. So you may want to try to gradually introduce chametz back into the home so that it's sort of just becomes natural, instead of just, you know, okay, now we're going to get rid of all of our Pesach stuff. I mean, obviously not dishes, but in terms of the food, you know, you may want to keep giving them matzah or keep giving them other Pesach, you know, other recognizably Pesach food, you know, to help them transition back to chametz. With that, I'll have you take over, Shira.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I think that concludes like our formal perspective on what one might find helpful to keep in mind as you get ready for Pesach, which is so close at this point. But we thought that we could invite everyone to participate in sort of a Q&A now, and that we start that from these 2 questions. We're wondering if anyone would be open to sharing something that's happened over the years that you find as a Seder practice that has helped you enhance your Seder experience, particularly for someone living with dementia, that you want to put out there. Obviously, everyone's situation, as Adina just finished saying, is unique, and each person living with dementia is unique, just as each person who's not living with dementia is unique. But we would love to get some ideas around what has particularly enhanced the experience. And similarly, maybe we can also identify a few things that have detracted from the experience that maybe we'd want to do differently this year. So anyone who wants to raise their hand, this is a great time to be able to share and brainstorm together. Thank you. You are all fighting to go at the same time. I see this is going to be a problem. We're not going to know who to call on first.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
We have been having the Passover for the last 25 years in Israel every year. And I ask my daughter, usually in Israel, please don't put me next to dad because he disturbs me and annoys me all the time. Put the food next to her and put a dish some for her and get up and get me this and get that one and tell her not to do this and take the food away and get up and wash the dishes and pick up the stuff on the floor. He's constantly, he doesn't let me enjoy the Seder. He's constantly telling me what to do and how to do and the people around him. And it annoys the people around him. And I try to put up with it. So the past few years, I've been telling my daughter, please put someone in between, or maybe we sit across each other so we can see each other better. This way I can supervise him. Not only that, he eats things he's not allowed to eat. He takes the whole charoset bowl and he wants to eat it. He forgets that there are other people around and he puts his spoon in his mouth and then he puts it back. So I always prepared a dish just for him. But this year I'm with my other daughter and we usually sit next to each other on Shabbat. It's a short meal. We make do. And when he says why we don't have this and why this is that, I say, it's not my house. I don't know. And I just make myself that I can't hear and I pass finger around and I change it. I don't feel comfortable telling my daughter because she has children around and she has a big family that to make a special accommodations that we sit away from each other. It doesn't look right for the grandchildren and great-grandchildren also. But at the same time, I'm putting myself at risk of ruining my Seder night.
Right. And you're saying in the past you have sat away from him?
Yes, in Israel, I had another daughter who knew how difficult it is because she was aware she was sitting next to me and she was aware of what's going on. But she could, so she always tried to put someone between us, or we sat across each other.
Leila,
I sat next to the kitchen and he sat all the way on the top in the front.
Leila, I'm just thinking, this is Shira, you know, I wonder if this is something that others on the call also are trying to think through, that yes, you want to be able to provide a meaningful Seder for the individuals in your life who have dementia, but you also want the Seder experience to be as meaningful for you as well. And so how do you strike that balance? And I think, you know, this is not unique to just the Seder experience, but maybe it's highlighted more here. You're right, a lengthy meal, as we pointed out before, and it's more than just a meal. And maybe it's a matter of, you know, sometimes you switch seats. Maybe you sit next to somebody for the meal part, and then you go sit next to somebody else when you go to the kitchen. You know, so I think we have to be a little bit creative. And I think also, you know, depending on the relationship you each have with whoever is doing the hosting, I think what we were trying to say earlier is that we're encouraging people to give people sort of as much advance notice as possible to set everyone up for success. So just as, you know, in this instance, your grandchildren and great-grandchildren and the other family have grown accustomed to seeing that you sit somewhat across the table as opposed to side by side, you know, it might be beneficial to say, I understand you have so much going on, but just so you know, I think this would help with the flow of the Seder in the context of, you know, the cognitive decline that my husband is experiencing. So, you know, every situation is unique. I think you have to know your folks, but certainly if you anticipate this being a problem, I would think it probably makes sense to initiate the conversation and say, I want to work with you. I know you already have a lot on your plate. How could we work this out together beforehand?
Okay.
Does that sound right to you, Shira? Shira, Adina?
I see we have Risa's asking in the chat, hi, what are your thoughts about not bringing a person with dementia to a Seder when you feel that person will be uncomfortable? I guess so that person will be uncomfortable. I don't see a problem with it if the person, I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to make the person uncomfortable. I'm wondering if if there's a postscript to that question or further.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things that I'm wondering, guys, at Shira again, sometimes it's a matter of figuring out, is it the person with dementia who's going to feel uncomfortable? Is it ourselves who might feel uncomfortable? Is it a little bit of both? So that's one thought I had. And the second thought is, I think this comes up a lot with all of this got all this smachot that we have, right? You have a happy, joyous occasion. You have a wedding, a bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah, upsharing, whatever it might be. And you're trying to decide, like, does this family member belong in this setting? Are they going to thrive? Is it going to be overwhelming? Is it going to be too much? And maybe if you bring them to this function, the Seder, and you don't kind of prepare the host and the others who are going to be there, it might feel overwhelming because people won't be sensitive to it. But maybe if you do it upfront, prep, it ends up being more manageable. It's not all on you, but every situation is different.
Thank
Anybody have
you.
any thoughts? Yeah.
Hi, it's Risa, actually. Thank you for answering the question. My mom has been recently, well, not even recently, but she has dementia and has been recently acting out in the past several weeks, very disoriented, very confused. And the woman that I would bring to the Seder is actually not the mother that I have known my whole life. And so if I hearken back to that woman, she would not be comfortable in the situation, that even if it's family and everybody is aware, it's, so I think you hit the nail on the head, Shira, when you said it could be a little bit of both, but I mean, I'm not embarrassed. This is what's happening and this is the reality, but it's very sad and very overwhelming for me as, a caregiver, but also trying to be cognizant of how I think she would feel about the whole thing. I don't even think she realizes that it's Pesach. So, I mean, I bought a bus of matzah in our house,
I mean, it's also like I think you're bringing up the concept of the person's own dignity. Like, how do you do this in a way that, I think, again, every person has to make their own decision. For those of you who are feeling more religious and you feel like you don't want this decision to sit on just you, and you have a trusted person in your life, like a rabbinical figure with whom you have a deep connection and that person knows you and understands you, I think that's certainly a person to consult with. And I don't think there's going to be one answer for everyone on this call. I think it totally depends on your situations. Adina, I can see you wants to add something.
Yeah. Well, I would also ask, thinking about just in terms of comfort, like, would she, like, I could see not taking her to a full family Seder. Would she appreciate having a mini Seder or playing music? Perhaps there's something when we can think about, especially when you're thinking about somebody with agitation and you really are trying to figure out, like, how can we keep her comfortable? Would there be something that could trigger, something positive for her, that maybe doing it at the Seder might not be the right forum, but maybe there's something that could be done, at a different time, either before or after.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Food for thought.
I think just before we go on to Cindy's question, I just want to say that these questions that you're bringing up are so important. And, we don't have any magic answers. I think we all wish we kind of had a baton and we could make it all better. But I think just the fact that you're giving it thought ahead of time and you're armed with like some tools, hopefully at least one thing that we've talked about will resonate. And maybe if not from Adina and I, maybe one of your fellow peers on the call will say something that will speak to you. So with that, Cindy.
Yeah, actually, mine was a response to her. I always ask, who will benefit from this? So if bringing her is not going to provide her with a benefit, then I personally think it's okay not to bring her. But if it's us that benefits from it because it's too much work or we have discomfort or whatever, then I think we have to rethink that. But I always assess it as, who derives benefit from the experience and who doesn't benefit from the experience. Um,
Thank you,
and
Cindy. That's a good way to look at it. I never thought of it that way.
good. I'm glad that's helpful.
Thank
Because I
you.
know I try so often to come up with activities for my husband, because I think, he needs to be out more, he needs to, engage more, or I need to stimulate his brain more. And then I've come to realize that a lot of times it's really about me needing to be out, and that he's not really benefiting from that. So I I think we sometimes have to frame things differently. And I I mean, I'm, 90% sure that I'm going to go to the Seder, and our our child is going to be out of the country this year, and normally he would be with us, but we're going to go to our synagogue Seder, which we have done before as a family. And I I know he's going to have a conflict with like a Yankee or Mets baseball game, and that he no longer can prioritize the way he used to prioritize. So before he would have said, like, well, I can't watch the game tonight because it's the Seder. Now he's going to be at the Seder saying, I need to go home and watch the game. And that I've learned, you just can't fight it. So if I have to leave, so you
I
can
didn't
go.
get that. Could you try again?
Whoop, sorry, that's my watch is talking back to me.
This is Shira. I
So-
was just thinking as you were speaking that, this idea of choosing our battles and what we fight, it's really hard. And while Cynthia was speaking, I kind of came up with a new idea that I want to throw out there as a possibility. And I don't know if this is realistic for everyone, but for those of you who find yourself in a similar situation, I wonder if it might be possible to have your loved one, to have your family member, the person for whom you're caring, come with you with the intention that at some point early on, the person will leave. But, we're going to give this a try. We know that it might not work out so well. We're going to make it like a family interaction, and we'll see how it goes. And we have a plan B backup right away, that if at any point, just the same way we talked about going into a separate room to be able to have some quiet time,
Mhm.
there can really be a plan for how do I bring this person back home or back to wherever they normally are. And for
And-
some of you, that might be more tenable than others, but
Mm.
you'll never know until we try, and yet we don't want to try and have it be uncomfortable for everyone around.
And I never went to a synagogue Seder until last year, because I just determined at this point that it was overwhelming for me to do everything. And I moved from a 3,000 square foot house to a New York City apartment. It's like, and, I have a husband who can't remember which side the meat fork goes on. So, I just sometimes have learned to let it go. But our rabbi is actually fantastic at dealing with people with disabilities. And one of the things I learned last year that I think for me was a good lesson was the requirement is to tell the story. That's the mitzvah. But it doesn't mean you have to read it verbatim out of the Haggadah. It only means you have to tell the story. And the story can be short if you need to condense things because your loved one doesn't have the ability to focus long enough for a Seder. You can say it in a much shorter time. You can say it in English instead of saying it in Hebrew so that they'll comprehend it. And that was a good lesson for me because, I always thought you had to read the Haggadah from page 1 to the, very last song. And that was why as a child, I was always up until 2 o'clock in the morning at our family Seders, but it doesn't have to be that way. And it can still be halachically correct. So I think it's good to have, as you all have said, you have to be flexible. And if you don't have any expectations, then you won't have any disappointments.
Thank you for sharing. That was really insightful for everyone, hopefully, to hear. Does anybody have a question, a comment, or just want to use this time to get ideas from one another? It's hard. I can't read your expressions when all I see are black screens with names on them. I want to know. Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I actually just so you know, I'm dealing with both parents with dementia. My father is bedbound, my mother is not. Last year, my sister who also lives, nearby, we did a Seder together with, just it was my husband, myself, my sister and her daughter, and my parents. And actually, I found that the singing, the Nirtza, was really what brought out my father and my mother much more than, the Magid. They insisted each on their own level that they had to have, a Seder, but it was really Nirtza that brought it all out. So, listen, I don't know what to expect this year. It's going to be different this year, but, just the singing somehow is very, very helpful.
The science tells us this is the case, and I think I just kind of firsthand experience, this is what we're finding. And I think whatever is effective in bringing the people in your life to be engaged is kind of the best way to go. And I think for a lot of you, if you try singing, you'll be surprised at how magical it is. How about some of the others of you? Is there anything maybe that
Anything
you've
we didn't
heard?
cover.
Yeah. Or anything you heard tonight that you think you want to try and you want to say like out loud, I'm going to try this year and here's why.
Yeah, I mean, this is not related to the Seder, but I'm finding that the earlier you make Pesach, if you're able to, the less stress and the less, because, I'm so busy and whatever. Like last night I went to sleep and my oven is still not covered. And as sitting here now, my oven is still not covered, but, I had a cleaning person last Wednesday and we started, I started doing my kitchen last Wednesday and it's Monday night and I'm still not finished, so it's part of reality.
Mhm.
But the earlier you start and, the less stress you have.
And then there are those individuals who like to procrastinate and wait to the very last moment. And then when the last moment hits, they're like, I got this. So,
No. My parents' house, on the other hand, we can't start till, the day of the summits because it'll all get undone, So that's why my house has to be Pesach because the cooking has to happen in my house. So
You're cleaning for two.
I'm cleaning for two. And I have to be available to clean next week for them. So everything has to be finished cooking before that.
there is no doubt that all of you are like superheroes on this call, right? It's not an easy experience and you have a lot on your plates. I think I see a new hand. I think Cindy, your hand is up from before, right? Or unless that's a new
Oh,
question, I'm
yeah.
not sure.
No, it's up from before.
Okay. I mean,
And the other thing I'm going to say is I have put away all of my good china and all of those things because my husband breaks them anyways. But I got over it, is the way I say it. And I think that, it's not the most ecologically friendly stuff, but I've become okay with, plastic disposable utensils and paper plates and, plastic disposable plates and, tinfoil pans for Pesach because I just don't have the capacity I had before. And I think what really matters is our intention and that we just have to accept that we're doing the best that we can. And I don't have much family and I don't have anybody to impress. And it's not going to be that fancy stuff anymore because it's just too overwhelming. And I'm okay with it.
I feel like you just gave everyone else permission. Thank you for saying that out loud. I'm sorry. That feels heavy because there's a sadness in that too, right? But
Yeah.
there's also a sense of, I'm just gonna focus on what's most important. It's kind of like you get down to the basics and you know what really matters. And you go with that.
And
have it
paper
be
plates are real good this time of year.
Geula, is that your hand up for something new or from before? Geula, comment or question? Kept out.
You're muted, Gula.
I was thinking to see, my husband usually likes to have bread until the last minute. And it's a conflict. It's a problem because it's hard for me to manage until the breakfast he wants to have, and then still I have to clean, and then it's almost like impossible. I manage it with 4 children and with so many guests, but he has been insisting. I think that this year, since I had matzahs all year round, I always keep them. And he hasn't had matzahs for a long time. I decided this year to buy some egg matzahs, and we'll start with egg matzahs 2 days before. I'll just put it on the table and I'll say, I just don't have bread. We just don't have it. And I will make some of the eggs that he likes, like a shakshuka or something new that he doesn't have every week. And he'll have it with egg matzahs. And it will work. I hope he doesn't fight me. But if he really wants to have it, maybe we'll have the night before, we'll have pizza. That's another way of doing it. But it takes a long time to make a trip to the pizza shop, and you know how busy they are. So it takes a lot of time. So I'll have to see how it works. I have to be extremely flexible. So we'll see how it works. Because he is at my daughter's house, he'll try to be on his best behavior, that I know. It's just that he will not send me back and forth to the kitchen and give me instructions what to do, what not to do the whole during the 3 hours. And when I see that he's really tired, we'll just excuse ourselves. I'll put him to rest and I'll come back.
Let me ask you, are you said you're going to be in Israel?
No, I used to be for the last 25 years in Israel. This year I'm here.
Oh.
In Westchester. I decided not to travel with him. His kidneys are not working properly. I don't want something to happen.
Okay.
I rather, if something happens, his doctors are here, and I think it's safer for him too.
No, that makes sense. I was just gonna say, I actually I got a lot of this material actually from a recording from a Israeli dementia program. And one thing they were saying that, and this is a benefit in Israel, is that, you know, once Pesach hits, you really can't find all that much chametz.
Right.
So, it's sort of in the environment. So you're kind of creating that
a box.
It's just not here, you know?
Right. But I have to be creative. It's different. And not only that, right after Pesach, he wants to go out. He wants to have a hamburger, and he wants to have a chametz and ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. And I, until I clean up and put everything away, I don't bring it in until the next day. Maybe it takes longer when I had children to clean up. So it took me time, and he didn't like it. He said, Passover is 7 days. You made it 8 days. Now you want me to have it 12 days or 2 weeks?
Right. So you bring up such a good point, Gula, right? We're all dealing with different personalities.
Yes.
The personalities we had that existed pre-dementia diagnosis, and sometimes it changes with the dementia diagnosis. So yeah, I'm sure that there are several of you who have more manageable caregiver situations, and some of you have more complicated, less manageable ones, just by the nature of how, you know, easy someone's disposition is to begin with. And so when you have a more complicated soul who is, you know, a little more directive, I think it's definitely an extra layer of complexity, and that doesn't take away from how difficult the experience is for each of you. But I am aware that some individuals make it particularly hard and enjoy making it hard for others, but hopefully that's not most of you. And Geula, your creativity, your perseverance, it continues to
Thank
work for you.
But one thing about Passover, it has something for everyone. I remember many years ago, we had a non-Jew at the table, my father invited, and he enjoyed it so much. And each one of the kids were different ages and neighbors and this and that, and we enjoyed it. Everybody found something special about it. And it was wonderful, wonderful. We didn't have silver and china. It was very, very simple. We were not well-to-do. It was first year we were immigrants, but we had a wonderful Seder. There was something for everyone. And that's the wonderful thing, especially the singing at the end, the children, the Manishtana at the beginning, at the end, the older people like to participate. And then when they do the noises with the animals, Chad Gadia, my husband loves that. He's usually the bow wow. We give everybody a job. And it's funny and it's nice and he participates and I direct everybody when it's their turn. So there's something for everyone to make it fun. And I hope we all have fun and enjoy it and create a new memories, a completely different one than the years before. I hope no Seder will be the same like the 1 year before. It should be always different because we grow. Just like the Parashat HaShavua, I understand it differently. Now I'm 78, but when I was 68 or 58 or 48 or 28 or 18 or 8.
That might be our most wonderful closing note. I don't know.
I
It's
know,
hard to
I'm like,
follow
Geula,
that.
thank you.
Geula, that was like so beautiful. A bracha that we should all have a kasher v'sameach, a meaningful, happy, healthy Pasach together. Is there any comment, any burning questions or thoughts that anyone wants to put out there? Anyone's welcome to do so. Yes, on behalf of Caring Kind, Dina and I wish you all the very best. We really invite you to be in touch with us at Caring Kinds throughout your dementia caregiving journey. I did not do justice. I barely scratched the surface of all the programs we have. So at any point now and going forward, if you want to talk to us about how Passover went, we're here. Go ahead.
Right. Even on Passover, I'm going to be around Chol Hamoed. So if anybody wants, we're going to be sending a recording and the slides. So on the slides are both mine and Shira's emails. So, feel free to reach out if you don't have our information already. If you have our information already, also reach out. And we want to wish you a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, Aziz and Pesach, and it should be good.
Thank you very much. Likewise
you.
to you both.
It was very useful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was a good refresher.
Thank you.
Right.
Chag Kasher V'Sameach, everyone.
Thanks everyone for your participation.
Thank you. Alrighty, have a good night.
Bye.
Right.